I think they're one of the things that make living on land so pleasant. If you didn't have trees around you, it'd be a little bleak. Like, there's really nothing like just sitting under the shade of a tree on a hot day. So that was kind of the superficial reason I was attracted to them, because of the way they looked. And then I learned eventually that they have amazing chemistry. Like, because plants can't move, they can't run away from their problems. So they have to deal with them biochemically. Whereas animals invested in kind of organs and mobility, plants invested in chemical diversity. So they can do things to this day that our organic chemists, our human organic chemists, cannot even dream of doing. They make these incredible molecules using the sun as their energy source. So that also initially really drew me to them. I was really interested in chemistry. I felt like it offered this really neat way of like thinking about the world and compartmentalizing things. Eventually, I kind of moved towards biology because I think the problems in biology, I liked their like complexity. I liked that they never have a straight answer. There's always an exception to everything. I'm Will Dwyer. I'm a member of the 2023 cohort and a first-year PhD student in the biology department. J'imagine un monde où les générations du futur peuvent s'inspirer du monde naturel. I imagine a world where future generations can look towards the natural world for joy and inspiration.
Welcome to the Imagine a World podcast from Knight-Hennessy Scholars. We are here to give you a glimpse into the Knight-Hennessy Scholar community of graduate students spanning all 7 Stanford schools, including business, education, engineering, humanities, law, medicine, and sustainability. In each episode, we talk with scholars about the world they imagine and what they are doing to bring it to life.
Today you'll be hearing from Will Dwyer, a first-year PhD student in biology at the Stanford School of Humanities and Sciences. During our conversation, you'll hear Will's experience immigrating to the United States from France, his love for plants, playing in an ultimate frisbee league, expressing himself through writing, and so much more.
Hey, what's up, y'all? Welcome to another episode of the Imagine a World podcast. I am your co-host, Willie Thompson, at the Business School and at the Ed School. I am joined, as always, by my amazing co-host and friend, Taylor Goss.
Hey, Willie.
What's up,
I'm
man?
coming from the music department, a music science and technology master's degree, and a master's of arts in public policy.
Yeah, and as we learned last time, you're not a real student. So
I'm not a real student. No. Currently, I'm doing recording projects and finishing a final project, but in effect, I don't attend classes, so I'm merely a ghost on this campus.
Must be nice. And
We have a special guest joining us today.
And it's not just Will.
It's not just Will,
It's someone who's been on the pod before.
although they are special.
Yeah, they are special. Been on the pod before.
Yes.
Very special to us. Special to the pod. Special to Will. The one and only.
Sydney.
I don't know if I was supposed to say that.
Tell us a little bit
Everyone.
about yourself, Sydney. Remind the viewers.
Yeah,
The
hey
listeners.
everyone.
The listeners.
Yeah.
This is Sydney. I'm back for episode 2. Really excited for today. I'm in the 2023 cohort and a first-year PhD student in electrical engineering.
Fantastic. So look.
Multi-talented, multifaceted.
I know. Multi-hyphenate. Right?
Yeah.
Into it. So we heard the Imagine a World statement, and there's a lot to uncover there, a lot to unpack there. But before we get into the statement, let's get into some pleasantries. Will, how you doing?
Hey, I'm doing great. It's sunny. The flowers are out. Can't complain. How are you?
We're good.
So few people ask us that.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for acknowledging us.
You're very welcome.
I'm doing great. Especially glad to be here with you, Will.
Yeah.
Spending some time, quality time. Because, we've exchanged pleasantries around Jennings House, but I don't think we've ever really hung out. So I'm excited about this.
Yeah, no, same. Excited to get to know you. A little nervous, I will say, but you guys make a good vibe in this room.
Appreciate it. Try to do what we can.
Yeah.
Yeah, so what folks might not know is when we initially talked to Will about being on the pod, we were considering adding another member from the team on the episode. We said, yeah, why we have Sydney on the pod? And then Will said, oh, she's like my best friend. I was like, wow, look at that. Didn't even know. We're just like doing this stuff sort of subconsciously. And so, we're excited to have a conversation.
We are good at this, aren't we?
Hey, man.
You are. Excellent.
Best in the game. Best in the game. Watch out, Joe Rogan.
But yeah, we had a best buds episode today.
No, exactly. Oh, that's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
Well, you said the flowers were out, and real quick, I want to get to this. You said the flowers are out on campus. We know about your PhD. Do you have a favorite flower?
Whew, a favorite flower. I will say I'm in my California endemic phase right now.
Okay.
So the poppies are out, really like those. And then the purple and yellow lupines are also really cool. They're these kind of like composite flowers. They have these tall structures. They're usually purple or yellow. And the cool part about them is that if you dig them out, they have nodules on their roots. Those nodules are the house for bacteria. And those bacteria fix nitrogen into the soil. So they're really helpful plants.
Where can I find these poppies? And what was the other one? What was it called? Lupines, yeah.
They're everywhere along the road right now.
Are those the ones around the lake, like that we walked around yesterday?
No, that was wild radish or something.
Oh, radish.
Yeah, we ID'd that together.
Oh, nice.
So
Okay.
this is a
Yeah.
team radish.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for that flower fact.
I know.
You're very welcome.
We might have to do a couple more flower facts later in the episode.
Agreed. We'll have to check that out.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
there's more where that came from.
Okay.
Oh wow! I can't wait to do this. Okay. Before we talk about the world you imagine, Will, which we'll get into that. Let's talk about the world you're born into and the world that you've experienced thus far. So, where are you from, and what was your journey here to Stanford and the poppies?
Yeah, let's see. So I had a bit of a sinuous path to the poppies in Stanford. I was born in Luxembourg, and I lived there for approximately 2 seconds. And then my family moved to suburban Paris, which is where I spent the first 14 years of my life. So from my wee lad years to my awkward preteen years. And then after that, we moved to the United States. So my dad is American, Japanese American, and my mom is Belgian. And the reason we moved to the US actually is because I distinctly remember this, like around the age of 13, 14, I overheard my mom have a conversation with my dad about the fact that we were becoming too French. And that was a problem.
What do you think she noticed that was becoming French about y'all?
It's hard
Too
to,
French,
to
excuse
say
me.
without being stereotypical, but we didn't speak English,
Okay.
for one.
Sure.
Probably complained a little too much, too.
We love our French friends.
Yeah. Yeah, we were becoming a little bit too Parisian for her liking. And she's Belgian originally, so.
Parisian. Yeah, that's okay. Yeah.
They have a particular way of speaking French, too. You'll hear a lot of like, at the end of the sentences.
Oh, okay.
And then a lot of complaining, too, that's for sure.
And a very high standard for French, apparently, from what I hear, the Parisians.
Yes, they do. If you try speaking French to them, they'll just start speaking to you in their broken English because they don't want to hear it.
Okay.
Interesting.
So I don't speak this, but I grew up in an area where Cajun French is really prevalent. So it's like this sort of dialect of French that's been generationally shifted far from standard French and especially Parisian French. So I'm sure that if any of the old folks around where I grew up who spoke Cajun French started speaking to a Parisian, they might lose their minds. Because I've listened to the two, standard French versus Cajun French, and it seems almost like completely dissimilar.
Can you give us a little sample?
I mean, the
chair.
problem is that I don't actually speak Cajun French, and I don't want to do it injustice. There's only like a couple of phrases, and this might be pretty standard French, but like, my great aunt and uncle, I would go to their house, and I remember sitting as a small child, and she, handed me a bowl of gumbo, and I was like, "Oh, thank you so much," and she said, "C'est ça c'est bon."
Oh my God.
Yeah.
What is that? What's the reaction?
Oh, it's good.
I guess I hear a little Quebecois in there. And
Okay.
I don't know where Cajun comes from. Like where geographically.
It is French Canadian in origin. Yeah.
Yeah, I see that. And both my little brothers are currently in Montreal for school. So they're slowly turning their, I guess, native French into this Quebecois, which is beautiful.
Okay. So yeah, I remember ça c'est bon, and I remember couillon.
Couillon.
Because a couillon is like, you idiot, essentially. With varying degrees of intensity depending on the context.
And that literally translates to balls or testicles.
That's hilarious. All right, so your mom realized y'all becoming too Parisian because I want to make the Parisian, not French, because Parisians are very particular.
Yeah.
Too Parisian. And then what happens?
And then when I was 14, my family moved from the suburbs of Paris to the suburbs of New York, which is where I went to high school for 3 years. It's also when I learned English. So if I say something completely wrong today, that's why. Just a preface. And then I went to college in upstate New York. And then I've been here for 3 years. During the pandemic, after graduation, or my non-graduation from college, I decided I wanted to experience some greener hills, greener pastures. So I moved west, and I've been here ever since, loving it.
I love it.
That's the story.
But you just go to college. You ran in college. I feel like he's selling himself short. Will is very athletic, and he doesn't give himself enough credit. I did a little deep dive on
research
him and
master.
his running skills. And I won't give you the exact stats, but Will ran a pretty fast mile. That's all I'll say.
A fast mile. Okay.
I think Will should brag about it.
Yeah,
What was
Yeah.
your-
So wait, everybody, before we, everyone close your laptops.
Oh, sure.
All right. Sydney, what's the fast mile to you?
Oh, like below 6 or 7 minutes, like
Okay.
8. I mean, there's a different threshold, right? In high school, when I was more in a peak prime, I would have said below like 6. Now it's like below like 10, maybe.
I haven't timed myself. It'd take me an hour. I don't know.
I would agree with Sydney. Mine's probably like below 8. I remember in high school we had a guy, Will Ficklin
Yeah.
is his name. He was like
Shout out to Will Fick.
Shout out to Will Ficklin. He was a Wendy's like All-American some type thing for track and
man.
field.
Okay.
But I remember being like, they said, oh yeah, he runs like it was like a 6 something mile. I was like 6 minutes to run a mile. It might have been faster than 6.
Yeah.
But I remember being like, I can't believe a human body moves that fast.
Right?
It's hard for me
Yeah.
to think about it.
Right. Yeah.
So Will, fast mile.
4:25.
Wow.
Yeah. Insane.
Wow.
Insane.
Which is actually not considered that fast. I hate
Okay.
to say it.
Okay. Well,
Yeah.
to me, it's very fast.
very fast. I mean,
I'll take it, you guys. Thanks.
Will the Flash Dwyer is what I
yeah, we should use that.
That was years ago. My body can no longer do these things. But yeah, the mile was not at all my event. It's like basically considered a sprint or a mid-distance race. And I was always kind of a slow, like stamina kind of guy. So I ran 5K, 10K steeplechase. Do you guys know about the steeplechase?
No.
It used to be a horse race. It's the one with like water on the track. It's about 8 loops of the track, about 2 miles. And you have these thick barriers that look like hurdles, but they don't move, so you can't run into them. And one of them has water. It's an Olympic event, but they don't run it a lot in high school. I think the only high schools that run it are in California and New York. But yeah, that's what I ran.
And fun fact, Will and I, we found out in conversation that he actually, my high school in Cornwall, upstate New York, would run this event called Steeple Fest. And turns out Will ran like at that race when I was in high school, like there. And so in theory, we could have been at the same meet. And we had no idea that we would
Ships
cross
in the
paths, 6 years later, 5 years later. And here we are. So amazing.
so cool.
Beautiful.
Cool.
A full circle.
Wow.
Very full circle moment.
Did you also run steeple?
No.
Okay,
I was no, gosh.
Did you
I
observe steeple?
Observed,
Observed
yes. I observed
steeple, okay.
steeple. I did hurdle. Like I was a
Okay.
400 hurdler, so only 1 lap. I wasn't going to do 8.
It's much faster,
But I
though.
think steeplechase, in my opinion, is the hardest track race. No, I see Will peeking at my notes of what we're talking about. And yeah, but I always admired people who were able to run, first of all, more than 1 lap of the track, better yet, jumping, consistently, and then into water as well, in all weather conditions. I always admire those people, for sure.
Yeah.
It's no longer who I am. Those days are behind me.
Who are you now?
Are you sure?
Yeah, now I run 3 miles around Lake Log, and I'm dying. So
Okay, you still admitted you run 3 miles.
Yeah.
I mean, I think I run 3 miles like twice in my life, and that was in high
Yeah, I
school.
maybe run 3 miles over the course of my life.
Oh, hilarious.
There is one note that I know that Sydney dug up. There's a photo of you of your track photo.
Oh my God.
And you have a flower in your hair.
yeah, I do.
Yeah.
What's the flower and what's the significance of that?
I actually don't know what that flower is.
Do you wanna see the
It's like
flower?
a little purple one.
Do you remember that? Yeah.
I remember putting it in my hair, and I think it was an act of rebellion. I was already thinking of quitting the team at that point.
Okay.
Had a difficult relationship with my coach. I hope he's not listening to this pod. And the flower was a collective act among some of my teammates to just like zhuzh up the picture, the roster photo. But yeah, this was pre-plant days for me, so I actually don't know what the flower is.
Wow, so
Yeah.
there's some
Wow.
foreshadowing there.
Right? Yeah,
That's very cool.
it is.
Do you mind if we back up a little bit? How old were you again whenever you moved to America?
I was 14.
Okay, so how did you feel about the move? Was there trepidation there? And once you moved, what differences did you notice? How did you think about life in France versus the U.S.?
Yeah, that's a good question. Short answer, I was mad when my parents told me we were moving.
Big mad.
Yeah.
Because
It just felt like my world was collapsing.
right.
You know, you're 14, those are rough times. And I was just starting to find my footing in my school. I was starting to make some cool friendships. And I was really excited to have my little brother join me at the same middle school at the time.
Okay.
And then, my parents kind of announced to me that we were going to move. And it was on pretty short notice. I think it was maybe a few months later. And so I was upset, cried about it a little. But it turned out to be, I think, one of the best things that's ever happened to me. Not only because it just exposed me to a different part of the world, another way of living, but socially, I think I meshed much better with the American school system than the French one. And I didn't know this until moving, but schooling in France and my life in France was actually pretty difficult. I was going to a Catholic school at the time, which didn't always agree with my own, identities. And I had school from, I think, 8 a.m. to 6 p.m., 20 minutes for lunch. I had school on Saturdays. It was really, to this day, I don't think I've worked as hard in my life as I did when I was 14, 13.
Wow.
Sheesh.
So the move was eventually not well received. And then quickly after that, I realized that it was actually...
And I want to maybe use that as a transition to how do you get to plants? How do we land on plants as an area of focus and study? Yeah, and granted, I'm in the business school. You know, we do things at the 30,000 foot level. That I'm probably missing some nuance probably in my articulation of that. But how did you get to that as a field of study and something that you wanted to pursue as in a terminal degree? Because terminal degrees, like you're doing policy. I'm at the business school. It's like flirting. Like we flirting with academia. Like you and Sydney, like y'all like we're committed.
We're in the weeds.
Yeah. You're in the weeds.
In the weeds.
Let's go.
That was good.
That was lame. I'm sorry.
That's good.
That's a good question. I think it requires a little context. In college, and I guess prior, I've just always been interested in science. So I knew I wanted to be a scientist. I kind of flirted with the idea of being a physician. I think that was partially just inherited from maybe societal or parental beliefs that that was a good career choice.
Are either of your parents physicians?
No, they're not.
Okay.
But I don't know. It's just always sort of been encouraged around me that medicine is a great path forward. If you like science, if you want to help people, if you want to make some cash. So
You'll never be unemployed as a doctor, probably, right? Or a physician.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right.
You're going to have a job.
Right.
So.
Right. Yeah.
But then right around the time I had to start taking the MCATs, I decided that was not going to be my life. I had at that point collected a few kind of research experiences under my belt and really liked them. I loved spending time in the lab, kind of like just digging away at one really specific, really niche question that probably most people weren't going to care about. But it was a fun way to kind of tackle little puzzles here and there. But at that point, I was working on kind of biomedical problems. So like, human health. I worked on like metabolic disorders in a hospital. So they were still really animal systems. And then something happened right before my senior year of college where I was living in New York City at the time, working on metabolic disorders. One in particular called propionic acidemia, but that's a different story. And I was spending a lot of time in Central Park, just looking at trees, contemplating the fact that I was living in a densely populated urban jungle, and that was kind of stressing me out. And plants kind of took over my brain for a few different reasons. One, I just think they look otherworldly and beautiful, just like aliens undercover.
I love it.
And I think they're one of the things that make living on land so pleasant. If you didn't have trees around you, it'd be a little bleak. Like there's really nothing like just sitting under the shade of a tree on a hot day. So that was kind of the superficial reason I was attracted to them, because of the way they looked. And then I learned eventually that they have amazing chemistry. Like, because plants can't move, they can't run away from their problems. So they have to deal with them biochemically. Whereas animals invested in kind of organs and mobility, plants invested in chemical diversity. So they can do things to this day that our organic chemists, our human organic chemists, cannot even dream of doing. They make these incredible molecules using the sun as their energy source. So that also initially really drew me to them. I was really interested in chemistry. I felt like it offered this really neat way of like thinking about the world and compartmentalizing things. Eventually, I kind of moved towards biology because I think the problems in biology, I liked their like complexity. I liked that they never have a straight answer. There's always an exception to everything. And then philosophically, I also have a million reasons that I love plants. I'll just give you one because I don't want to bore you too much. But
You're not
No,
boring,
this
so
is
by the way,
interesting.
I mean, maybe I might, I don't know if I'm gonna do a PhD in biology, but the way you talk about this stuff is very
Makes me think about
it's
it.
engrossing.
Yeah,
Yeah, it makes you think about it. Yeah, it's very thought provoking.
that makes me happy to hear. So plants are the entry point for energy on Earth. Like all of our energy comes from the sun, other than like hydrothermal vents, if you want to consider those. And they're also important, but on land, at least, all of our energy comes from the sun. And that energy is inaccessible to us animals and to most bacteria. But there's one kind of organism on Earth, the green ones, plants, that have learned to eat the sun and make that energy accessible to everything else. So plants are literally the energetic basis of ecosystems on Earth. And every single bond in your body, like every single chemical bond, is held together by energy that was delivered by the sun and made accessible by plants. So they're pretty cool beings.
Honestly, man, let's just turn the podcast into a plant podcast.
I think
so.
honestly,
Yeah.
we just have Will as a recurring guest.
Yeah.
Dr.
Plant-
Dwyer. I mean,
yeah.
you'll be a doctor at the end of this.
Soon,
Just different
yeah.
doctor,
Yeah, in like
Dr.
6
Dwyer.
years.
We got time to make it a thing. Plant chats with Dr. Dwyer.
Honestly,
Ooh, spin-off podcast.
Oh, there it is. A segment. You can have a recurring. Do you want a recurring segment on the
I
podcast?
would
Yes.
love a space where I can talk about plants.
Yeah, let's
Oh my
Yeah,
gosh,
let's do it.
please. I want to talk about the plant work that you did when you moved to California, because you talked a lot about like being in Central Park and loving the plants there, which are very beautiful. But you spent a good amount of time like post-college here at Stanford doing some research before you did your PhD. And was there any like turning point during that made you want to consider a certain path or another?
Yeah, so I came to California right after college, which at this point was a little over 3 years ago. And I was working on Stanford campus in this institute called the Carnegie, which I think most of you probably haven't heard of. It's this distinct, it's like an independent institute that's technically based in Washington, D.C., but they have a few departments here. So they're affiliated with Stanford, but kind of their own entity at the same time. And they have a department of plant biology. I joined that department and worked in the lab of Suri, who turned out to be just a fantastic mentor. And at that point, I would say I was pretty set on studying plants, and I was using the tech job as a way to confirm that I wanted to pursue this for 6+ years in grad
It's a
school.
long time.
Yeah, you want to be sure about it. There I was studying plant metabolism. So metabolism, I think we have this kind of like intuitive understanding that it's like this like thing that keeps our bodies alive. But concretely, metabolism is the set of a few thousand-ish reactions that keep your body alive and provide energy and break down nutrients, etc. Plants have pretty incredible metabolism because it's kind of biochemistry. And yeah, they can generate all of their food by themselves. Like they don't need to consume anything else, which means they have this like incredibly diverse metabolism. And I was studying the ways that their metabolism responds to the environment. So I wouldn't say I took any sharp turns in my interest during my tech job, but it definitely confirms that I was interested in, well, plant systems to begin with, and then specifically the ways that plant systems interface with the environment, which is what I'm planning on studying for my PhD.
Also, a little fun fact that I learned today. So before this podcast, Will and I had lunch every day, as we always do. But he told me this really cool thing about how you can like look at. I'm going to butcher this because I'm not a plant person. But long story short, I'm going to have Will explain it. But there's like a really, really cool microscope that Stanford has multiple of that are very rare in the world that allow you to see certain things about whatever you're looking at. And I would love if you would explain that to the world because I found it fascinating.
And just as one quick follow up on that, can anyone use these microscopes, or are they only? Okay, yeah, be a
Yeah, there's a long line. Yeah.
Okay.
So this might get a little technical real fast, so please cut me off. But Sydney's talking about electron microscopes, which they're not rare per se. Like they've existed for about a century, or they were theorized about a century ago. And there's a bunch in the world, but Stanford happens to have, I think, 8 because we have SLAC here, which is the Stanford Linear Accelerator Center, something like that.
About the messaging app.
I know. I thought it was the messaging thing.
I
Yeah.
was like, hey, yeah, I've heard of Slack. Yeah, that's good. Okay.
Oh yes, I'm familiar.
Yeah, not too technical yet.
Basically, we have a government-funded lab that's right next to campus. It's called SLAC. A few people from KH actually work there. They mostly do kind of physics, particle physics experiments. But then one of the things that they do have is a bunch of electron microscopes. And these things go for like $1 million plus a microscope. So they're not casual to just have lying around. And basically what they do is instead of using light to observe matter or observe structures the way that optical microscopes work, they use electron beams, which have a much, much smaller wavelength. So their resolution is the ability to kind of discern an object from its background. So it's like, normally we you've heard of like magnification for a microscope, but in reality, resolution is a more helpful metric, because if you have really good magnification, but then you can't discern the object from the background, then you have poor resolution, and that sucks. So anyway, these microscopes have incredible resolution. It's something on the order of like sub-nanometer, which to put it in kind of human perspective, that's like being able to watch a tennis match from the moon and like seeing the ball move.
Wow.
Isn't that insane?
That's crazy. And finally, that was not too technical. Because even when you said, you're talking about that, wait, is within a nano what?
Nanometer.
Nanometer. I was going back to my chemistry, when we were doing the units, going from, no, it wasn't technical at all. It's very easy to follow. Yeah. I would say, just a couple of clarifying questions about these $1 million microscopes. Size, are they big, small?
There's two kinds. The scanning electron microscope is pretty small. The transmission ones, which is the ones I'm hoping to get my hands on, are pretty huge.
Okay.
We're talking like taller than you and maybe like 2 or 3 people wide.
Whoa.
So they're big. Yeah.
That's huge.
Because they need to have a big vacuum. They need to be really cold. They have like these insane magnetic fields to focus the electron beam. So they have a lot going on.
So you've already talked about currently what you're doing in these $1 million microscopes, which I find is crazy. And I'll probably never see them, given how long it takes to use them apparently, but I'll just use Google for now.
That works, yeah.
Or Dolly, we just get Dolly to drop
Yeah,
one.
true.
Yeah. So your Imagine World statement, you're basically talking about an idea of future generations and their relationship to the planet and what they derive from it. In your mind, what's the current generation getting from the Earth, and what are we getting from the natural world that's keeping us some joy and inspiration?
Don't get me wrong. There are lots of people nowadays who appreciate the natural world for, many reasons. But if I were to sum up our relationship to nature these days, I would say it's extractive. Mm-hmm. I would say we use up natural resources faster than they can replenish. And I would say that rate is increasing, which is not a great trend to be on. And then beyond that, I think there's this disregard for the other ways that nature can provide for us. Whether it's just fulfillment or enjoyment or leisure, play, basically. These things are overlooked often for the more economical reasons to appreciate nature, which those are also important. But yeah, our relationship to the natural world has been mostly extractive. And in my statement, I think what I'm trying to get at, well, there's 2 parts, right? I would like future generations to have access to nature, which requires for patches of wilderness to still be present. So it's one, the access to wilderness, which I hope will remain a possibility. And then 2, also encouraging people to engage in relationships with nature that are more than just extractive. Encouraging people to just go get lost in the woods for a while, for lack of a better phrase. Can we find ways to rekindle connections with nature that are more than just economical, but also loving, reciprocal, fulfilling?
And I feel like you touched upon that in a shameless plug for Will's story online on the KH website. So we have this thing where scholars can basically write little excerpts about whatever they're feeling. And this piece was actually inspired by an incredible talk from Will. So if you don't know, the first year Knight-Hennessy scholars all take a class together called Storytelling with Dan and Lisa from Stanford, who are amazing. And in the winter and the spring quarter, the scholars rotate and get to give a talk on a different topic. And Will's talk was about the tallest tree in the world and his journey to finding it. And I'm mentioning it because you just talked about getting lost in the woods. And so I was like, oh, this sounds familiar. And so basically his talk was so amazing. Everyone wanted him to put it into a story, and he did. And I wanted to know if you would talk about that. You're welcome to read an excerpt from it and leave people on a cliffhanger, whatever your heart is desiring. But I think this journey was an incredible one.
Oh, thank you, Sydney. Yeah, I'm happy to talk a little bit about that. So Hyperion is the tallest redwood on Earth, the tallest tree on Earth, tallest being on Earth. It's somewhere around 300 feet tall. So like 30-story building. And I have to give a disclaimer here that it's now extremely illegal to go look for it. So it's not on any sort of trail. It's kind of like miles away from markings. It's
What?
Yeah. It's in the Redwood National Park, and I think there's like a 6 months jail sentence now for trying to
find it.
Yes.
Wow.
But what if you? So can you only stumble on Hyperion? Like, what's the? Yeah.
I don't think it's not that casual. Like, it's really lost in the middle of nowhere. You'd have to be there intentionally if you're caught.
So it's
around
pretty
the tree.
obvious if you're looking for it.
Yeah, it's pretty obvious. And to be fair, a lot of people have been going to Hyperion recently, myself included. And, you know, that has some impact on the environment. It creates these like social trails.
Okay.
And then people have been littering as well. Like there's been garbage around the tree. So rightfully so.
Just to be clear, this podcast cannot be used as evidence in a court of law.
So I was going to say, disclaimer, I went before it was illegal. And Stacy Stacy from marketing actually made sure that that was specified in the story.
Shout out Stacy for always keeping us in bounds.
Oh yeah.
We don't want any trouble here. So yeah, Hyperion is this like amazing tree that's a few thousand years old. And I went looking for it a couple years ago with my friends. This was in November of 2021, I think. I took a bunch of my friends to go backpacking. We spent 3 days in Redwood National Park and the adjacent areas. And then on one of the days, we just went off trail, looked for Hyperion, found it. It's amazing, but I will say it's actually, from the base, it doesn't look any taller than any of the mega trees around it. So any of them could really be record holders and you wouldn't know. And that was, I think, sort of the point of the story, or one of the points was that Hyperion is this beautiful, like record holding creature, and it's completely unassuming. Like you would never know, there's no plaque. It's not screaming, "Hey, I'm the tallest being on Earth." It's just sitting there around a bunch of other trees that look identical to it. So yeah, there's nothing, I guess, completely special about Hyperion. But yeah, it was an amazing journey, and I'm so glad I had a space to write about it and first talk about it. Sydney was in the room. I was fixating on her, so I'm not nervous about
As an anchor point.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
If folks looking for it, it's Coast Redwoods Will Never Die. So feel free to check that out on the Knight-Hennessy Scholars website.
Thanks for the plug.
Always. Yeah. So you've written about this experience. I know that you're also interested in books and writing and fiction. In fact, I believe you ran the Community Reads. By the way, community with a KH in it.
Yes.
As we so often do.
And what are Community Reads?
The community Reads are a tradition by which we assign a book for people to voluntarily read and gather to discuss. And you ran the Community Reads program last quarter. Yeah, what drew you to the book that you chose?
So the book was...
that the community chose, I should say.
Yeah. So yeah, this was a pitch I made to a subset of Knight-Hennessy scholars, and we kind of all unanimously agreed to vote on it, which I had the support of the masses, which is why I got picked. But Kay Barrett and I, so Kay is a second year.
Yep. She was on our first episode.
Yes.
With Lydia
right.
Burleson, that's right.
Mm-hmm.
And she was, so helpful because I am not a literature scholar, and it was just so great to have her around. Like she knew who to invite. We got actually one of her advisors, Ramon, to come and talk for 20-ish minutes about the tradition behind the book. And then lead a little talking circle community sort of debrief around the book. But yeah, the book itself is The Dispossessed by Ursula K. Le Guin. It's a work of speculative fiction, which broadly means it's like imaginary fiction. And I really liked the book. I thought it was in line with the theme of last quarter, which was living a fulfilling life. Because the book examines kind of the journey of the main character, Shevek, as he goes from... So he lived on a moon an anarchist moon. And he returns to the home world, which is this capitalistic kind of Earth-like world that's, brimming with natural resources, but has these kind of warring nations. And so he goes from the anarchist bleak moon back to the home world. And there's a lot of kind of themes around, like what is a fulfilling life? Like what does life mean to Shevek in a way? And so we had a bunch of conversations around the idea of utopia and whether utopia can exist. Because the prefix in utopia can either be EU, which means the good place, or U, which means no place.
Yeah.
So the utopia is a good place that doesn't exist, basically.
Oh, snap. Can you answer that question for yourself? What is a fulfilling life? What does that mean for you?
For me, fulfilling life means going backpacking every month and then spending some time off the grid. That's how I stay sane. And just studying what I love. I would say I'm in general driven by passion. And that seems to be a recurrent theme around Knight-Hennessy, but I really have very little bandwidth for things that don't make my heart beat. So the PhD is a great route for me so far because I just get to spend so much time studying these little questions that I care about, that I have to convince other people to care about as well. Mm-hmm. Yeah, but that's a tough one. I mean, living a fulfilling life is like asking what's the meaning of life, and I don't have the answer.
Yeah. This, in a roundabout way, I think, what you're talking about with the reason that this book was created, the reason that we had a conversation around it was to talk about the way that we frame our relationship with the earth. And there's a paper that you wrote, Renaming Indigenous Crops and Addressing Colonial Bias in Scientific Language, which is about the relationship of scientists to, I guess you would call it taxonomy or naming in relationship to indigenous communities. But it's also a question of framing. So I wanted to ask you about this paper and why you thought it was important to write about and what has happened with that work since.
Yeah, absolutely. So the impetus behind that paper was kind of born out of a realization that scientists are not trained in language typically, but language obviously influences the way we think and affects material outcomes. Like the way you frame something influences how it's perpetrated through generations, what it will mean to people in the future. And there's this particular phrase in my field in plant biology called orphan crop. Orphan crop refers to a category of crops that are not the kind of crops you would find in your supermarket in the United States, but they're consumed by millions of people in regions of the world like, South Asia, South America, Africa. So for example, teff grass, probably never heard of it, is the number one crop in Ethiopia. Like literally tens of millions of people consume teff grass. And you can, start seeing it in the more like hipstery supermarkets here because it's like a cereal that's gluten-free, that has pretty high protein. And quinoa actually used to be one of those grains that nobody knew about. And now it's everywhere. It's been a little co-opted.
Interesting.
And so orphan crop is this really strange word that implies that these crops are somehow like helpless. There's a bunch of synonyms that are used, like underutilized crops or forgotten crops. And I was working with these crops, just as a quick tangent, developing kind of metabolic resources online for people to be able to study them. Because in addition to being called orphan crops, they're also called understudied crops, and that they often are. And I was realizing that the word was really landing on me super wrong. And I talked about it with my PI at the time, Suri. And, we had lots of conversations about what could be like a helpful new framework for thinking about these crops. Like, can we name them something else so that we don't convey the sense that they're helpless, that they somehow need saving? And we landed on understudied indigenous crops. So I wrote kind of a quick opinion paper for a journal on pushing this name forward, and then had a bunch of talks around Stanford and Carnegie, trying to convince people. Some people really disagreed with the idea. And I think part of that is because the word indigenous itself means really different things to different people. Like, for example, in Canada, the word indigenous is almost considered like negative. Like they use First Nations to refer to indigenous people up there. But in the US, indigenous has a pretty accepted, I would say, usage. So that was the impetus behind the paper. And it's true, I do really like to write. So I spend a lot of time thinking about language and the way that I can best phrase things, especially to convince people that the earth is cool and they should care about it. But in this case, it was, to convince scientists that maybe this word orphan crop, this phrase, has an origin that we should examine carefully and try to rethink.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. On the topic of writing, I also want to plug The Good Scientist. What does that mean to you? Because I know you spend a lot of time on it, and I feel like it's an expansion of your opinion on responsibilities scientists have outside of research.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so the Good Scientist is a nonprofit that I work for. It's based mostly in the Netherlands, like that's where most of our volunteers are. It was founded by my amazing colleague, Elena. And together we started a newsletter that we call Undoing the Ivory Tower. And we publish monthly. So there I take on the role of editor more than writer. I wrote a few articles in the beginning, but basically it's a platform for scientists and people outside of science to have dialogue. So that can mean so many things, right? Like I love to write or get people to write about community participatory projects that involve both scientists and non-scientists. But it's also a space for people outside of science to make demands of science, to say, here's what we wish science did. Or a place for scientists to reflect on how they wish their work was more accessible to everyday people. So we've published, for example, some essays around the use of language, around public and private partnerships in the energy sector. Recently, I interviewed a phenomenal geneticist named Dr. Crystal Tsosi on this concept known as indigenous data sovereignty, which is basically the not so revolutionary idea that indigenous people should own their own genomic data.
It's a crazy idea.
Yeah, a hot take, really.
Sarcasm.
So I work on this newsletter every month, and I'm actually really, really excited for this month's issue, which is not out yet, but will be by the end of the month. So before I give the punchline there, let me just backtrack and say it is really hard to find people who want to write. Like even people who have these amazing stories to tell, they do amazing work. I ask them to write about it and they're like, can't, too busy.
Why?
I don't know. People don't want to write. It's not a very popular activity. Maybe I'll use this as a pitch to say, if you're listening and you want to write, hit me up. But it has been actually really difficult to find people who are willing and able and have the time to write a short piece for us.
Yeah.
So I spent 3 months convincing my friend Raksha from the Oceans Department, which is one of the departments here at Stanford. And she is writing this amazing piece that I will not spoil, but it's on eco-spirituality and kind of like the fact that scientists should maybe try to reconnect with spirituality in a way, because we're always taught that, science and religion are these diametrically opposed interrogations of the world, that they're like, should not be able to coexist. And she wrote this beautiful argument in favor of maybe we should see what happens when we merge the two. So I'm so excited to publish it.
I want to read that now. Yeah.
We'll put a link in the show notes when the episode drops. To your point, Will, about writing, my wife writes, and even now she's starting to, Naomi, she's starting to embrace this identity as a writer, because it's almost as if once you sort of say you're the thing, then people say, oh, well, like, and so there's all this like social connotation to it. But whenever I talk to her about writing, I think she's a gifted writer. So I think that's like also the thing, like she's really gifted at writing. And I think she's helped me realize, the difficulty with good writing, not just writing, because anyone can just write something, but like good writing, it just requires you to be able to slow down and like really take what's in your brain and put it out to the world in a way. And it's really hard to do that in the world that we live in. It's hard to say, even if I want to write a short piece, do I have the space to actually to know what I'm trying to say, articulate it, reframe it, or frame it in a way that resonates with people, and that is accurately reflecting the experience, the perspective that I have, right? It's like something that, and especially, the running joke is like our biggest argument was about ChatGPT for a while. It was like, it takes away from that process, right? Like, it's supposed to be like a mundane, like slow thing to do. And in a world where you're really not incentivized to do that, it makes it much harder, right? To do it in an evocative way. And, I could feed all the Toni Morrison works or David Butler, but it's like, I don't know if you get the same thing, right? Because it's connected to an experience that we all share and have. Anyway, so I just said, when you said that, I think that really resonated, at least with the conversation I'm having at my own house about the burden of writing, right?
Yeah, the burden is also such an intimate process, right?
Yeah.
Then you're like releasing this really personal like reflection or story into the world, and a lot of people are going to hate it.
Yeah.
It's a scary thing.
Yeah.
Terrifying.
And more props to you for doing that.
Yeah.
And for facilitating that for other people.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And, we've talked a lot about your work and your research, and we've touched a little bit on the fact that you go out backpacking and exploring. Let's talk a little bit more about your life outside of academia.
Academia,
what is, so, we're at Stanford, you're living your life as a Knight-Hennessy scholar right now. How do you maintain work-life balance? How do you think about that? What else are you up to around here?
When's the next off-site trip happening?
Yeah.
The next trip is May 16th to 19th. I'm going to Sequoia with some friends. I'm actually reuniting with some East Coast friends and taking them out to the Sierras for a backpack. But the way I stay sane is I just leave campus every single weekend.
That's so impressive.
Honestly, I go to San Francisco usually on Fridays. I come back on Sundays. I play ultimate frisbee on Sundays in a big queer league in SF.
You have a leadership role in that, correct?
Yes, Captain.
Newly minted captain.
Yes.
Captain Dwyer.
Captain Dwyer. He's extremely good. I had the pleasure of seeing him play earlier on in the year, and Will's phenomenal.
It's more of a social chair role than it is a captain. Like I get to organize kind of social hangouts and all that stuff, but it's been really fun. Yeah.
You don't need that qualifier. Just call yourself captain. It's fine.
Yeah. Captain of fun, that works too. Yeah. There was actually an ultimate frisbee like tournament happening. Was it last weekend, I think, or something? Like on
there
campus?
was. Yeah.
And man, have either of you ever tried to play ultimate frisbee? I have. Have you?
I've tried. I was extremely unsuccessful.
That was a pandemic activity for me.
Yeah.
Let's go.
It's one of those things where it looks so much easier than it actually is.
I know, right?
You know, and like
Right.
the skill of like throwing the frisbee and everything. Wait, so where'd you learn how to?
The flick.
Yeah, well,
The
just like,
forehand.
Yeah, and how'd you get into ultimate frisbee as a sport since you've given up running sub 5 minute miles?
Yeah. Frisbee was a new thing for me. I had never really played until a couple of years ago. So SF has these queer leagues that are really popular, and they have basically every sport imaginable. But for some reason, the Frisbee one is kind of the biggest one. Like there's 300 of us playing Frisbee every Sunday, and then we all go to a bar afterwards. It's like sick. So I joined because it just looked socially appealing, like a fun way of meeting new people. And then I completely fell in love with the sport. Like it's such a fun projectile to throw. Like, the way it flies is just so...
Yeah. It's graceful. Almost.
It's beautiful.
Yeah.
I feel like an airbender. It's
Well, Brianna brought up Avatar in our last episode, so I'm a big fan.
Yeah, and you also do it in a beautiful setting. You all play in Golden Gate Park. So, it's
Yeah.
really nice to play
the park
there.
is so nice. It's full of daisies and there's like geese around us. It's really nice.
Yeah, and I feel like it's one of the more accessible like sports to play. I mean, granted, if you can't throw a frisbee that far, you just need like at least 2 people who can throw a frisbee.
Yeah.
And all I gotta do is run.
And Frisbee people tend to be chill too. I think it attracts the kind of person that I just get along with.
That's great.
Yeah. So yeah, that's what I do on the weekends. And then once a month, I try to go a little further, off into the trails. So this year I went to Crater Lake in Oregon. And then I did a little road trip up in like Utah, Arizona, went to Big Sur for like the 6th time, came back covered in ticks.
Oh,
yeah.
Wow. On these trips, do you often bring your camera with you?
Yes, I do. I bring a film camera usually and try to snap some shots. But recently I've been having some technical difficulties. I think there's something wrong with my shutter or something. But yeah, I love taking some pics on trail and getting my friends in there. Yeah.
Special types of photos, though, not like iPhone, whatever.
Film pics.
Yeah.
iPhone pics are great too.
They are great, but like, I don't know. I've seen, Will showed me his portfolio of his photos, film photos, and I had never seen a film photo portfolio before this, and they are much better, in my opinion, than iPhone photos.
Sydney.
It's a very different type of style. He got a new role recently, so I'm looking forward to seeing what those end up turning out to be.
You stay gassing me up.
Always. I'm your hype woman. You know it.
Well, as our time here comes to a close, we like to finish our conversation with a little bit of discussion about the Knight-Hennessy community and your experience with the application, and maybe share a couple facts. How has your experience in the Knight-Hennessy community been since you arrived at Stanford? How has it contributed to the Stanford experience?
It's been completely amazing, life-changing. Just obviously Sydney sitting right next to me. That's a big part of why it's been really great. But Yeah, so beyond, lunch in Sydney, I could talk about all day.
The two best things about Knight-Hennessy.
Oh, you're so sweet.
There's a lot. I mean, I think, graduate school and maybe especially PhDs can feel like silos in a way. Like you're kind of stuck in your little world and you're having fun, but you're not really meeting that many people outside of that world. And especially people who maybe disagree with you on stuff. And KH has been really amazing for that. I mean, I come to lunch and I'll have conversations about like the Mexican Supreme Court or something I know literally nothing about. Mm-hmm. And it ends up enriching my days in ways that I just never see coming. For some reason, I get along really well with the law people here. So I've been learning about this thing that I just do not understand. It's just convoluted to me. But yeah, I've had some really amazing conversations. The community is so loving and caring. This year, there's been, some difficulties in the community, and I've still seen it kind of take care of itself. It's really nice to be part of an organism like that.
I was about to say, I was thinking about plant when you said taking care of itself.
Yeah.
Picking up what you were planting. I guess I wouldn't pick it up. It's like in the ground. I was sniffing what you were planting.
Yeah,
whatever,
there you
just
go.
wafting. That's amazing to hear, and definitely resonates with I think at least I'll speak for myself, my experience too about the power of an interdisciplinary community.
Absolutely, it's how you meet your bestie. You know, like I.
How did y'all meet, by the way? What's the? Yeah, we never
What's our
actually
meet cute?
On the deck, right?
On the deck during denning lunch. Funny enough, yeah. I feel like you should.
We met pretty late, actually.
Yeah.
And we didn't really meet during immersion weekend or even during like first
year retreat.
Yeah. But yeah, we were sitting on the deck with a little group of people, and then people started trickling out one by one, and then it was just me and Sydney left on the deck, had a little chat, and the rest is history.
Yeah, and I feel like if I don't see Will in a day, I have like withdrawals. Like yesterday, he texted me and he was like, "Your location's turned off on your phone. Are you okay? Where are you?" And I was like, "Oh my gosh! Like I need to know where you are. I need to know.
I need to know where Sydney is at all times."
Yeah, and it's amazing because not only do you get to see each other in Denning and on campus, but we live in the same building as well. Will is very kind and has cooked, and he has extra. And he's like, "You want food?" And I'm like, "Yeah." So yeah.
I fixed Sydney's shower recently.
Yes,
she was
fixed
having
her shower.
I did.
Yeah.
You're a handyman too?
He's
Not
a
at all,
handyman.
usually.
No, for sure. It's like honestly kind of this weird little fun codependent relationship. But I love it, and Will adds so much joy to my life. I'm super grateful for him. I really don't know like what the turning point was, and like me like wanting this person to be a like regular friend, like consistent, being able to like share your heart with someone, I think is really beautiful. And I don't know, I don't do that very easily. And so I have so much love and respect for you, and I'm grateful that Cage brought us together.
Right back at you.
Amazing.
That's so sweet.
Yeah, it is.
That's the sweetest moment we've had in this podcast.
Honestly, yeah. Wow.
He said he's running for personal best, right?
Right.
It's all true though. It's facts. And speaking of facts,
Smooth transition.
look at that. Look at that transition. If you've listened to our episodes before, you know that a regular thing we talk about is our improbable facts. So when you apply to Knight-Hennessy, you have to list 8 improbable facts about yourself. These are things that are true about you, but no one might know about you. And I'm curious, Will, if you would share a few, why you chose those facts, and or if like new facts that you've learned about you in the last year came up post your application that if you had to do it again, you would now include them.
All right, yeah, I have 2 facts if you'll indulge me.
Oh,
I have one from
absolutely.
the app and then one new one.
Okay.
So the one from the app that I really liked is when I was in middle school, or when I was a kid, basically during my childhood, I had a like makeshift lab in my parents' garage, and I loved collecting like periodic table elements of all things. So I just ordered these like crazy things from eBay. I had things like no kid should have. Like, when my parents were gone, I like evaporated iodine in the kitchen and it turned purple. I like made some explosive devices with hydrochloric acid and
Oh man.
tinfoil.
One weekend I got my hands on some uranium.
Well, I had a couple things like beryllium and osmium that I realized were actually acutely toxic.
Oh no.
So I had to call actually like the city kind of like EHN, like environmental health and safety to dispose of it. And to this day, my parents don't know about this. So if they listen to the pod, they'll find out.
But it's no longer at the house, I'm assuming.
It's no longer at the house. It's been safely disposed of.
Okay.
Did you also get that from eBay?
Yeah, I did.
So it's crazy enough. Earlier in the class today at the GSB, we had a case where someone was trying to recruit someone who used to work at eBay as VP at eBay. And in the role play they were like, well, how much do I need to pay you to work here? And the person's like, I was making $1 million at eBay or whatever. And now I see why.
Yeah.
He's trafficking toxic materials
Black
across
market.
state lines. My goodness, what a profitable endeavor. Anyway, I just thought about that. But yeah, so collecting periodic table elements.
Yeah. It was a cool kid.
Yeah, and you were using these just like not with protective gear, right? I remember you telling me you were like.
I had gloves.
You grab a couple paper towels.
Yeah.
Yeah, but the people who came to pick it up were in full suit, right? Who came to your house. And,
They were better equipped than I was.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a little DIY, but it was fun and I survived.
All is well, you're safe, you're alive.
And my new fact, if I may.
Yeah.
Yes.
I realized just how good of a snoozer I am. I can literally sleep forever. And every morning, I start my day by snoozing at least 4 to 8 times.
So how far ahead of time do you set your alarm?
30 to 45 minutes.
Okay.
Because the snoozes
not
are
terribly bad.
8, 9 minutes each.
It's not great, but it's not the worst I've heard.
It feels so good though.
It hits snooze.
Yeah.
So
you
it's
get
like
to
a
fall
dopamine
back
every time
asleep.
you hit snooze. Okay.
Yeah, just falling back asleep or just falling asleep in general, I think is my favorite feeling in the entire world. And waking up, I love life and being awake, but waking up is just not something I'm great at. So I feel like I can minimize the pain and continue getting that dopamine from falling asleep by snoozing eternally in the morning. To my housemate's dismay, because I think he's hearing
Because they
the
have to hear the
alarms.
jingle over and over again.
Right.
I know that whenever I hear the iPhone alarm jingle in a context which is not sleeping, I get chills.
Your
Oh,
heart
God.
starts beating fast.
Exactly.
Yeah. No, I know.
It's like a Pavlovian response.
Exactly. It totally is. Yeah.
I have the gentle, just beep, 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 beep.
Okay.
And it takes me 10 minutes to wake up from it too. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's also a frog one on the iPhone. You should
Is
check
there
it out.
really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Wow.
Full croak in the morning.
Wait, can you play it?
Yeah, let me find it.
I've never heard it. I'm so curious.
I worry that that would play into my dream. I don't know that it would feel like an alarm. And I'd be like, oh, another animal, birds chirping in the morning. You hear the frogs croaking now. But no, it's time to get up.
Yeah.
How do you?
Sorry, Willie's stomach is acting up.
Oh, it's a duck. I'm sorry.
That's so much better.
Wait, that's better.
I don't know. I love it. Imagine waking up to that.
Oh my god.
I was like, that's the craziest frog I ever heard in my life. That makes sense.
Yeah. Okay. Those are some pretty good facts. Thank you for sharing them.
You're welcome.
Before we ask our final question, we want to close out with one final flower fact. Mm-hmm. I brought my guitar, and we're going to do a little bespoke theme song. For
Yeah, we're talking about this song.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
Yeah,
I'm so
a little
excited for
serendipity.
this.
I'm so honored.
Yeah, of course.
This is a big moment because Taylor, as you know, is a musician, but this will be the first time that he's playing on the pod.
Wow.
And so
There we go.
it's
making
an
history,
honor.
Will.
Making
Yeah, and
history.
it's just an electric guitar, so it's kind of shitty for the purpose, but it'll be fine. Okay, what if it's flower facts?
That's crazy. We did not play that at all. That's crazy. Yeah, that's what. All right, let's go. Flower facts. Flower facts.
Let's go.
Oh my god.
All right, Will, what's our final flower fact?
All right, I'll leave you with this one. So, orchids. We all love him. We all know him. Orchidaceae is one of the largest plant families in the world. There's 20,000-ish species of orchids. Every single one of them has tiny microscopic seeds, and they need fungi to germinate. So you wouldn't have orchids if we didn't have fungi. Pretty sick.
Wow.
Fantastic fact. Fantastic song, by the way.
Flower facts. Flower facts.
I love the twist.
So good. Thanks for coming to Flower Facts.
Yeah.
Our friend, Will Dwyer.
Right. Well, Will, we're coming to the end of our time here. A feeling that you noted at the beginning of our time was that you're feeling nervous. How are you feeling now?
I'm feeling great. Feeling loosened up and happy. You guys, that was great.
Fantastic. Well, we love that. And we made history with with Flower Facts.
Yeah.
We've also made history because I believe you're the first European we've had on the pod this season. So continue to break records. You got to represent.
Yeah.
And in terms of representing, you're representing a bunch of identities, perspectives, and backgrounds here at Knight-Hennessy. For folks who are listening who would want to join this experience, be part of this community, what parting words would you leave for them as they think about applying and considering to be part of it?
I think the Knight-Hennessy app is really unique and really fun. And I think you shouldn't be afraid to be a little weird with it. So many of the things you'll apply for in your life are like so formulaic. Like if you're a scientist like me, you're constantly applying to grants and there's a very specific language. There are things you should say, things you shouldn't say. I just got rejected from the NSF, probably because I was a little too lyrical with my last paragraph. But the Knight-Hennessy app is not that. Like you shouldn't be afraid to be a little out the box. This community is full of like wonderful, eclectic, unique people. And if you want to be a part of it, I think you should really put your unique, your kind of like weird foot forward. Like you'll be valued for that over here. That's what I tried doing in the app. And I am not someone who's, had the privilege of these fancy scholarships, these recognitions, these awards, and it worked out. So yeah, good luck.
Awesome. Well, thanks again for taking the time. This is a great episode. We appreciate spending some time with you, and we'll leave it there. Take care.
Thanks, Will.
See ya.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Imagine a World, where we hear from inspiring members of the KHS community who are making significant contributions in their respective fields, challenging the status quo, and pushing the boundaries of what is possible as they imagine the world they want to see.
This podcast is sponsored by Knight-Hennessy Scholars at Stanford University, a multidisciplinary, multicultural graduate fellowship program providing scholars with financial support to pursue graduate studies at Stanford while helping equip them to be visionary, courageous, and collaborative leaders who address complex challenges facing the world. Follow us on social media at Knight-Hennessy and visit our website at kh.stanford.edu to learn more about the program and our community.